Welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. And in today's episode, I'm joined by Debbie Yaver, Chief Scientific Officer of Nature's Fynd, a company that's making amazing foods that nourish people and nurture the planet. Now, Debbie has spent her career working really at the forefront of industrial microbiology, harnessing biology to make better better products for the planet. And Debbie, it's a delight to have you come on the show today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. And so tell me, the love for industrial microbiology. Well, where did it all start for you? I'm thinking about the upbringing that you had, maybe, and some of the forces that really helped shape and drive your career, as it were.
Okay, so it's I have to say probably the biggest driver that ultimately led me into science and math, right, was my parents and the teachers. But surprisingly enough, one of the things that I think has shaped me and the drive I have and that collaborative spirit and teamwork, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, which I think is critical, right, to achieve and to bring new solutions, right, to today's challenges in the world. It was that my parents had us participate in a lot of different activities, including sports. So I played a lot of team sports, as well as doing dancing from a really young age. My dad, in fact, coached Little League baseball. He coached softball. He coached basketball. He was also president of the Little League, president of the CYO basketball. So he was both a coach and a leader. And seeing him in action, he was an individual that was always very positive, and even whether it was the star on a team or whether it was the player that maybe had the least skill, my dad found a way to make everyone feel really good about themselves and continue to develop them, developing their skills, whether they were the star or someone who maybe didn't have those natural talents. To me, competitive sports is a really great forum to learn about team, to learn how much more you can achieve as a team than as an individual. And that is something from a really young age, that I would say was instilled in me and is something to this day that I still believe. And I also believe a team, having played on many different sports teams over the years, having diversity, right? You don't want, the 10 stars who all want to individually shine, right? You really want a balanced team, right? Folks that are willing to work together to achieve something. The second I would think thing that has helped shaped me early on was that I fairly early in schooling, it became pretty apparent that math and science were areas that I excelled in. And both my teachers, a couple of the teachers that I had along the way, both in elementary school and high school, as well as my parents, did just kept encouraging me, right? It was never in my mind that, I'm a girl or a young woman and I can't do this. It was just, you can do anything you put your mind to, you have a talent here. If this is what you want, go for it, right? And that I think had I not had that, I could have easily seen, right, that I might not have ended up, going to science and math. I had a couple of, classmates, right, that I went through school with, girls, young women later in life, who were also very good in science and math. And the majority of them did not end up, studying science and math, in college, nor going in careers in those areas. I just feel like I was really fortunate. The combination of parents and the combination of teachers that just led me to believe, right, that I could do anything I wanted to. And especially if I was willing to embrace, right, being part of a team and being collaborative.
Yeah, were your parents scientists?
No, not at all. Completely different. My dad was a retail clerk. He worked in a grocery store, managed a grocery store for decades. And my mom was a phone operator.
Really?
So not at all, not at all in the science field. In fact, no one in my family, actually to this day, is in science or math in a STEM area.
Yeah,
so,
really?
Yeah.
When did you realize that you wanted to dedicate your career to science?
I would say even in as young as 4th or 5th grade, when people would ask me what I was going to be, actually, I used to say that I was going to be an astronaut. I was going to be a physicist and an astronaut. That was my, and don't ask me why, because I really hadn't had much, physicists, but the astronaut portion was right when I was growing up, right? That was when the the heyday, right, of going to the moon, right? And I remember distinctly, right, some of those events. And so it was pretty much at that point that I decided I was going to do something, right, in science. So.
Yeah, great. Remind me, where did you do your PhD?
I did my PhD at the University of California, Davis.
Got it. And was it in microbiology?
It was in microbiology, yes.
It was, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. And but because no doubt at that time when you were doing that, your, I don't know, maybe your view of where you thought your career would be. Did you always know that you would go to industry and apply this science, or were you thinking academia?
Yeah. So I was definitely thinking academia, and part of that was what was sort of the normal path, right, for PhD students to take, right, was to focus on getting a position in academia, and it was actually when I would say it was also instilled in me watching my dad and other folks in my family to seize opportunities, right? Never, say, no, that's not where I thought I was going to go, so I'm not going to consider it. And I was in the first year of a postdoc position, actually, at also the University of California at Davis. And a professor in the Department of Microbiology mentioned to me that there was this biotech company that was from Denmark that was opening up an R&D facility in Davis, and they were looking for folks with my expertise, and just mentioned it to me. And I sort of, thought this would be a great opportunity, right, to hopefully get an interview, go through the interview process, practice giving, a seminar and the interview and all of that. And I did get an interview, it was about 15-minute drive from the place, the company, where it was going to be located, back to the lab I was in at the university. And by the time I drove back, my major professor that I was working with at the time at the university, he told me, he said, "You're going to have a job offer." I said, "How do you know?" He goes, "They've already called me to ask for your references and you're going to get an offer." And sure enough, the following morning I had an offer. And I was told, that was a Friday, I had till Monday to make my decision. They had 20 positions they were filling, and they had over 300 applicants, and they wanted to fill those positions quickly. So I sort of, being someone who was sort of taught, right, to, seize opportunities, when they arise, I thought, what's the worst if I take the position and I decide, right, industry isn't for me, I can always go back, right? It's not like that door is closed back to academia. But obviously, since I stayed there for 28.5 years, I obviously enjoyed it. I never, regretted that decision. And I really enjoy, the fact that in industry, you can deliver, right, practical solutions, right, that have an impact, right, on the world and the environment, at least in the industrial biotech area. So
yeah, is that the key thing? Is it the practical impact that you know your ingredients, your enzymes are in the detergents, they're in the, you know, the bread, they're in the cheese, they're in the wine, you know, you could just understand that your component has made all those things.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's twofold. One is that, as I mentioned earlier, the whole team, right, the team and the collaborative. There's no doubt in industry that for companies that are, leading, right, leading in the area that they're in, and are delivering, products as well as results to their shareholders. It is all about, I mean, in order to get a solution fastest to market, which of course gives you the largest share typically of that market, you really do have to, right, work in a team and a collaborative and an efficient way. And that aspect of it, as well as the aspect that, and both the company I'm with now and the company I was with before, right, their mission, right, is to, make a difference in the world, make a difference environmentally, sustainability. And that's very important to me, because I want to know that, we're living, we're going to leave a planet, right, a world, for our grandchildren or their children and their children after that, right, a world that is still, right, livable, and they have enough of what they need, right? And I think if we continue the way we are without finding some solutions, that may not be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me though, when you're doing your PhD in microbiology, right, is that essence towards climate and what microbes can do for the world, does that come about, is that there right from the beginning, or does that develop as you go through working for Novozymes, for instance?
I would say it developed. I must admit that, and I think this is one thing that has changed since, I was a PhD student. Most of the, the courses that I took, and and the things I was taught or knew about, right, what microbes were being used for, were all, much more, I would say, understanding basic principles, right, of pathways and mechanisms inside a cell. Not so much thinking about, how can we use this, right, and harness this. Now, certainly that was happening out in the world, but I can say that it was, there was very, very little education and around, right, the practical uses, right, of microbes. Of course, medically you can think about it, and I certainly took some medical micro classes and such. But from an industrial point of view and the impact on the environment and such, there wasn't as much focus on that. Yeah. I would say now, at least when I go back and visit various different universities, there is a much more focus, right, on that, on the fact, right. I think most universities, right, have realized that their research has to be, translated, right, it has to be translational. That it's moving towards, right, something that perhaps can be used, right, out in the world, right, whether it be for healthcare, for industrial uses, for the environment, but much more of a focus on that. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Tell me though, if you compared, there were two things that came to mind, right? One is, I always think of Novozymes as being, as the world leader, as an unbelievably successful company, right? But I suppose looking back, you were working there 20 odd years ago, or 25 years ago. I don't know when it all started with them, but you must have really been at the point of quite an explosive. So I think of Novozymes now, the last 5 years, struggling for growth, but you were like right at the beginning and part of that whole trajectory. That must have been a fabulous time.
Yes, it was a fabulous time. So when I joined, actually, Novozymes didn't exist. We were part of Novo Nordisk. So I joined Novo Nordisk Biotech, it was called, in Davis, California. And we were part of the enzyme division. So there was the enzyme division, and then there was, the healthcare, insulin and growth factor and other products. And certainly when I joined too in the enzyme area, there was a lot of growth in research and development. It had been, in the last maybe 4 or 5 years that, they have started using molecular biology, right, to engineer strains to overproduce the enzymes. And after that, right, we grew quite a bit, increased those capabilities, expanded the number of microbes that we were using, right, as production host, expanded, the number of products that we had. There was quite a lot of growth. And it was about maybe, I should know this number off the top of my head, but I guess maybe 10 years or so into being with Novo Nordisk, that then there was a demerger, right? And Novozymes was spun out of Novo Nordisk. Even in the beginning of that, we had quite nice growth. And then, growth sort of, slowed up, when the economy, right, when the financial crisis hit. And of course, right, when you're in industrial biotech, depending on the market you're in, there's also an impact, right, of the price of oil, right, and how that impacts, right, different markets for which enzymes are used. So
yeah, absolutely. And but like right where we are right now, for instance, there's so much consumer orientation and focus on having sustainable products, for instance. But back then it was probably a different journey, right? Because I think of the aerial or the laundry detergents and what enzymes did when it comes to cleaning clothes, for instance. But I bet the story and the rationale, it was probably more about making quality products as opposed to telling a sustainability story, for instance.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you said, right, sustainability has become, right, in focus, and it's become, I don't want to say a buzzword, but, it's thrown around all the time, right? And I have to say, even when I joined Novo Nordisk in the enzyme division, they had a triple bottom line. So they not only reported, right, on their financials, they reported on the social impact, both on their employees, but on the communities they were in, and they reported on the environment. So they were one of the early companies. So even back then, they had a sustainability story, and they were reporting it. And I would say that even then, when we were looking at, new business areas, new enzymes, a new application, there was always an analysis done to say, does this have, right, a positive impact on the environment, either reducing energy uses, reducing water, reducing waste, whatever it is. There had to be, there were not products launched that did not have that footprint.
Yeah.
So, even before the big, the spotlight and the microscope being on sustainability, Novozymes and Novo Nordisk were already doing that, which I think is pretty admirable that it was already a focus even before, right before. But it was what drove a lot of the business decisions on, which new applications and products we would launch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you reflect back on your time there, it's clearly it was a super successful, and a great kind of career move for you, and you spent a long time, there, as it were. When you reflect, what are a couple of things that come to mind about that journey for you?
So I would say, the first thing that I appreciated about working for Novo Nordisk and then Novozymes was I was given lots of opportunities to work both in my area of expertise, which was engineering microbes, right, to produce enzymes and proteins and chemicals. But I was also allowed, to learn new areas like protein engineering. I was also allowed, right, to branch out and, become a leader, right, of a small group to start with, and then a larger, and then a functional area, and then, research in California. And on top of that, I was also given the opportunity, for instance, to see the business side of things, to work in, together with business folks and commercial folks to look at new areas, right? As well as collaborating externally. So I was given a lot of opportunities, and I seized those opportunities, I would say, but it was also the fact that, I was given those opportunities. There were plenty of opportunities to grow. So that's one thing that, I really appreciate. The second thing that to me is really high on the list is my colleagues. Not only my colleagues locally in California, but my colleagues internationally. I really, again, I think I said it earlier, I really appreciate working with diversity, a diverse team, right? Both diversity, right, in expertise, but also diversity, in backgrounds, whether it be, what country you're from, what university you went. And at Novozymes, I had the ability, right, to work with colleagues, of course, in Denmark, but, colleagues in England, colleagues in China, in Japan, it was Brazil, all over the world. So, and to me, that was very motivating. It was something that I thought it was a unique opportunity, and something that allowed me also to grow, grow as a person, because when you are dealing with people from different cultures, right, it's a wonderful thing, but there's also, differences that it's important to recognize. And I think it helped shape, it helped me continue to grow, as a leader and as a person, right? When I'm, outside of work, right, meeting with people, or traveling. I mean, to me, I look at that as a gift, right? An opportunity, right? To learn something. So I really appreciated that also, the fact it was international.
Yeah, no, great stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's, great learning ground. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. And tell me, joining Nature's Fine. I always remember getting a call, actually, literally before they closed the Series A. It was Sustainable Bio Solutions at the time, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, sustainable bioproducts.
Sustainable bioproducts. And
Yep.
I remember having a discussion with Thomas, literally back, Thomas Jonas, just around that particular time. But joining Nature's Fine for you, in terms of, what they do and the problems they solve, tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Yeah. So Nature's Fine, I have to say, to me, it's, again, right, I am very much, one of my values, right, is to focus on something that's going to have a positive impact on the planet. If you look at the challenges we're facing, right, the ability to be able to feed, right, feed, 9 billion people in 2050, if I remember the number off the top of my head. And there's no doubt that we can't do it the way we're doing today, right? So this alternative protein area, the food area, right? Finding sustainable ways to produce food that is not just nutritious, but is delicious. That's important. Otherwise, people don't want to eat it. Is near and dear to my heart. And Nature's Fine. One of the reasons, again, it was the people, the mission, and the people that drove me. So I had been consulting with them for about 4.5 months, and they, before I chose to join them, and the people, the culture here, the mission, what to me just felt like a really good fit. And the fact, if you look in this space, particularly in the mycoprotein space, so using the fungal biomass, right, as the main ingredient in food products, we are one of the few companies, right, that has a product on the market, right, in the grocery stores, on the shelf. So cream cheese and breakfast patties, and seeing, tasting them myself, but then also seeing the reaction from consumers, right? When we've gone out and done tasting, just made me realize this was something, right? This is definitely something that, I believed was going to be successful. It has a lot of potential. It's already been, I was able to take, I'm able to taste a lot of products that aren't yet on the market. and the range of foods that can be produced using fungal biomass, right, is the main ingredient. We call it Phy because our strain, right, is Fusarium that is found in Yellowstone. That's where the FY comes from. I just believe there's so much potential.
Yeah, amazing.
In this area.
Yeah. And so tell me just a couple of things. Let's start maybe with the microbe itself, because it's just in the world of microbes, right? Bearing in mind, I'm not a scientist as well. And there's this microbe found in Yellowstone, essentially, right?
Right.
Amazing, right? I mean, what's so different about that microbe compared to others, as it were?
Yeah. So this microbe, I would say, what makes it gives it some unique qualities is the fact it was isolated from a hot spring in Yellowstone. So, and this hot spring, if you've ever visited Yellowstone and you walked along the boardwalks that go by some of the hot springs, although this wasn't a hot spring in the area you can go walking in now, you smell that rotten egg smell, right? You see all these colors, right? And such. I mean, that environment for a microbe or any living organism actually is fairly hostile. It's very, very high in things like sulfur, which is where you get that rotten egg smell, right? In other metals, in salts. It is also very acidic. The hot spring that our organism was isolated from is very acidic. So this organism actually has the ability to grow under these harsh conditions, and the low pH, the acidophile characteristic of it actually is an advantage when it comes to production at an industrial scale, because many microorganisms can't grow down at that pH. So you reduce the incident of contamination, right, in your production facility. It also has the ability to be able to utilize a lot of different, if you want to say, food sources. So, it can grow on wood, it can grow on leaves, it can grow on waste whey, right, from a dairy, from dairy processing. So it can grow on a really wide range of substrates. So there's a lot of very interesting, plus it's a filamentous fungi, so it has texture, it has filaments. And if you think about, right, sort of muscle and such, right, it has texture because of the filaments, right, that are present in it. So that the combination of the fact it can grow in a pretty broad range of conditions, that when it has inherently some texture, but more importantly, it also is very neutral in taste, allows it to be, used to make a broad range of food products, everything from savory to sweet, right, and in between. So.
Yeah. So, as a microbiologist and someone that has worked with a fair few strains before, I mean, how is it like when you were thinking about joining Nature's Fynd and putting aside the mission and putting aside what they wanted to do, was it like, man, this is like so unique and so different from anything I've ever seen before? Is it as stark as that, or?
I would say it's something in between. There was a lot of unique there. I mean, it is unique, and our production method is also unique. So that was also something that attracted me to it. But the other thing on top of it is that having worked with a lot of microbes before, and knowing the types of techniques and approaches that we took, and looking what Nature's Fynd had done so far, I realized there was a lot of space for innovation that hadn't been yet tapped that could have an impact. And so to me, that was really exciting, feeling like, with the experience I have and knowing the type of folks that I wanted to hire into the team, I just felt like, it already had advantages and was unique, which was exciting, but there was a whole lot of innovation space around it that, that was ripe to start exploring. So.
Great. And when we think about the microbe, are there like lots of different microbes in Yellowstone, all of differing qualities, or is it just we've got this one and this is the one? Is that a hot ground for other things as well?
There are, yes. I mean, there are a number of labs that over the years and still continue, right, to study the environments, unique environments, harsh environments in places like Yellowstone and other places that just have this incredible diverse, right, sort of, and people continue to discover new microbes, new functions, new uses. And I assume it will continue. I mean, there are still, right, and, even though, in the time that I've been studying microbiology from a graduate student to now, if I look at the plethora of, new microbes that have been identified, I still believe it's only a very, 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 very tiny percentage of the microbes that are out there. So there's still a lot of untapped, right, potential discoveries that might have practical applications.
Great.
In the world. So
wow, exciting, very exciting. Tell me, when you're sitting there in the lab now and you've got all the equipment that you're using, and we compared it back 20 years ago or 25 years ago, well, what's the main, when we think about how much the industry has evolved, the industrial biotech revolution, as it were, people call it different things, but what are the biggest changes that you've seen in that within your career?
I would say the biggest change has been a combination of automation, being able to do more, right? More, more combinations of things, as well as then collecting all of that data and being able to analyze, right, large data sets. And the data collection, for instance, as a microbiologist, when I was working as a graduate student, and I wanted to, get the DNA sequence of a gene, right, for a protein that I was studying, we actually had to do that sequencing by hand and actually read the gel by hand. Now, right, you can get, right, I think there was just a company that reported that you'll be able to get the sequence of a human genome, right, for, a couple $100, right, in, less than 24 hours. So the advances, right, in the technology, and then the advances in analyzing that data quickly and using that data to continue to learn and make new hypotheses, I think it has definitely sped up, right, the being able to make new discoveries. However, I would still say it all comes down to, no matter how fast you're doing something, it all comes down to, are you asking the right question? Are you using the right approach? Because even though you can automate and do things quite quickly in lab, if you're not looking in the right way, right, and asking the right question, you bias, right, what you get out. So it's still, even though we can do things quite efficiently, quite fast, it's really important, right, to really think about, what approach you're taking, what based on the question you're asking. Otherwise, as we like to say, you get what you screen for, right? And if your screen isn't designed well, no matter how fast you can do it and how fast you can analyze the data, you're not going to be successful getting what you want. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So tell me though, how without giving me all the secrets of the process, you've got the got this wonderful strain, you've engineered it, you've got it producing certain proteins, as it were, and how do you then get that into a beautifully tasting breakfast patty?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, when we grow our organism, you can think about, if you think about a cafeteria tray, right? We grow it and we put liquid that has all of the tasty nutrients that the organism needs to grow, right? It grows as a sheet, if you want to say, almost looks like dough when you roll it up on top. We take those mats, then we call them biomats, 5 biomats, and they're harvested, right? They come off of the liquid. We heat kill it to deactivate the organism, so it's no longer viable, no longer living. We rinse it, do some downstream rinsing of it. and then dry it to reduce the moisture. And then that material goes to, our food scientist, our product development team, who take it, and then, based on their knowledge of whether it's cream cheese or whether it's breakfast patties or whatever, right, they come up with, right, a process and a formulation, if you will, right, to make the final product. So it's also, I would say, food science to me, when I watch it, it's a science, because there are, if you need to, for instance, get texture, if you need to get emulsification, there are specific, processes and type of equipment that you use. But it's also an art, because people have, right, they have, based on, the training they've done, whether it's flavor or texture or whatever, they can taste what they've produced or measure it in some way, right, on a piece of equipment, and then, modify it. It's pretty fascinating to watch. There's a whole different, field of innovation on that side of, that side of the work.
You know what amazes me when you think about a company like Nature's Fynd, for instance, you think about the expertise. The expertise needs to live in so many different places. You've just highlighted, molecular biology and some of the work going on there. Then we're now talking about, food science, biochemistry, application work. There is expertise in every single kind of area, different skill sets. And it always strikes me that that's probably the challenging thing with actually really making these companies great and bringing them to life, is having so much of an interdisciplinary competence.
Yes, absolutely. That, and also getting those folks that are in different expertise, right, to work together, to communicate really well. As Thomas likes to say, and I've heard it a lot from other startups, right? The one thing startups don't have enough of is time, right? We always wish we had done, we already had what we want, right now. And getting those cross-disciplinary teams, you really need to hire well, right? You want to hire people that are good communicators, right? That, for instance, the product developers, right, are, talking to the people doing the downstream processing, right, making the FI. If there's a change made in the process, right, the product development folks need to know about it, right, and they need to, understand, right, how it has changed maybe the ingredient that they're using, right. The folks in R&D need to understand, and communicate with the folks in the production here, right, to understand what are the challenges in production, what are the things we should be looking at, right, trying to improve in R&D so that, right, we can transfer it to production. So it is all about, right, having the cross-functional interfaces, right. We need to be sure there's good handoffs and good communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And how is that when you think about Nature's Fynd compared to globally orientated Novozymes, for instance? How are you finding the difference in terms of size and that aspect as well?
Right. I would say that again, because time is not our friend, right, at a startup, decisions are made a lot faster, right? Here they have to be, and they're also made more at the level where the folks have the knowledge, right? When you're in a larger company like Novozymes, right, there's naturally some layers, right, of hierarchy, if you want to say. And even though, right, Novozymes and the Danish culture is consensus building, right? I shouldn't say even though, because they are consensus building, it takes longer to make decisions because you want to hear everyone's opinion. And not that, here, we don't ask for a lot of opinions, right, when decisions need to be made. But we also know that we're never going to have all the information. We have to make a perfect decision, and we need to make a decision. And even if we make a decision and we start doing something and we find out, right, maybe we need to pivot a little, we've learned something during that time, right, between when we made the decision and when we had to pivot. So I would say it's much more dynamic, right? Even people that work here, you have to be someone who is willing, who is flexible and robust and a good communicator. And if a new challenge appears that's a priority, you may be asked, right, to drop what you're doing and pivot and work with another team, right, to solve something. And that is both, I mean, to me, that is really exciting, right? And I like change, I like that dynamic, but not everyone does. So, I think at a startup, you have to be someone who, as I said, robust and flexible, can easily work with different people, right? With different personality types, because, we don't want everyone to be a clone of one another, in order, right, to get, to have success, we need that diversity, and we need people that can work with that.
Absolutely. Tell me, at your heart, do you want to really get into the lab and still solve the problems? Or do you find yourself having to, oh man, that's not my domain anymore?
Yeah. So I have to say there are times that I would love to get into lab. I get that itch, but I haven't tried it here, because at Novozymes, when towards the end when I was there, if I would walk into lab, I knew they were working really hard, and I would say, hey, what do you need help with? They would look at me like with fear in their eyes. No, we don't let you in here. You haven't been in here in so long. No, I think more, where I see, right, that I can bring the most value now is, looking at strategically more the big picture, right? Not just at R&D, where, in R&D, what I'm heading up, but, in production, in marketing, right? Across the board, right? Because the decisions we make, right, at that strategically, ultimately end up, right, determining what we're going to focus on in R&D. And so my role, I look at it is being part of those discussions and those decisions, bringing, right, R&D's perspective to it, but seeing the perspectives, right, of the other functional areas, as well as then making sure in R&D we are building a team, right, that is fit for purpose to deliver on those strategic goals, right? And making sure that I am communicating, right, to the R&D organization, right, what are our priorities, right? What are the overall strategic priorities? Then what are R&D priorities? And then, allowing them then together, right, with their supervisors and managers to figure out then, right, what is it they as individuals, right, can contribute on, right, to ultimately achieve those strategic goals. Yeah, and then the hiring. I mean, we're in a pretty rapid growth phase. We're building up a research and development unit here in Chicago, so hiring a lot of folks. And to me, hiring is a really important activity, because I believe you should never settle. You just don't want to bring people in to have hands. You really want you want to hire people that you feel, right, are going to help build that team that is fit for purpose and are going to thrive and survive here. Because I don't care where an individual is working, whether it's here or Novozymes or someplace else. I want them to be happy and motivated and driven, because we all spend so many hours at work. If you're not happy doing what you're doing, you should be thinking, right, what else?
Yeah.
What else should I be exploring? So.
Yeah, 100%. It's the kind of world now post-COVID where people, they don't need to settle for that. And there's no room for that now. People don't need to waste their time in environments where they're not fulfilled and enjoying themselves to a certain degree, basically.
Exactly.
How big is your team then?
Oh, that is a good question. I should know this number off the top of my head, but right now in R&D, I want to so we have an R&D site in Bozeman, actually a couple sites in Bozeman, Montana, and one here. And I believe right now we are at around 65 people, and we have several positions that are open right now also. So,
yeah. Okay, that sounds great. And listen, it's been a wonderful chat. I could talk to you for hours about this, and but I really appreciated you coming on today, sharing your story, and talking through your career and journey. So thanks very much indeed.
You're welcome. Thank you.